Hello friends, welcome to a new chapter today. In this chapter, let us now learn about calcific degeneration, which is also called as band shaped keratopathy. Calcific degeneration, also called as band shaped keratopathy. If you see the etiological features, it is most commonly seen in ocular diseases, which include, it is seen in chronic uveitis, Still's disease, it is seen in chronic uveitis, Still's disease, phthisis bulbi, chronic glaucoma, chronic keratitis and ocular trauma. It is seen in chronic uveitis, Still's disease, phthisis bulbi, chronic glaucoma, chronic keratitis, ocular trauma. It is also seen in age related conditions, primary conditions like familial conditions, or it is seen in metabolic disorders which include hypercalcemia, hyperphosphatemia, hyperuricemia, chronic renal failure. So, what are the clinical features? It is nothing but a band shaped, it shows a band shaped opacity, that too in the interpalpebral zone with clear interval between the ends of the bands and limbus. This will begin at the periphery and then progress to the center. Then the surface of this band shaped keratopathy is striped. That means there will be holes present in the calcium plaque in area of the nerve canal of Bowman's capsule, resulting in transparent cleft. Even though this is not important, at least you should remember some causes, because one question has been asked once. Then this is the picture of the eye showing band shaped keratopathy. Okay, then if you see how are you going to treat it, see here the problem is in calcium, right? So you will have to chelate the calcium salts. These chelation you can do with EDTA. If you add 0.01 molar solution of EDTA with cotton swab for 10 minutes, okay, this will remove the calcium deposits, because the calcium combines with EDTA and thus it can be removed. Okay, sometimes you can also do phototherapeutic keratectomy with excimer laser, or we can also do keratoplasty. When we cannot treat with the other diseases, then you can do keratoplasty also, especially it can be done when it is affecting the visual acuity, okay, and also treat the underlying cause. Then if you see the next degeneration, there is Salzmann nodular degeneration is present. This Salzmann nodular degeneration is most commonly seen in females and it is unilateral. Okay, it occurs mainly due to the recurrent attacks of flictenular keratitis, rosacea keratitis or trachoma. Due to flictenular keratitis or rosacea keratitis or trachoma, there will be raised hyaline plaque deposited between the epithelium and Bowman's capsule. Here there is raised hyaline plaque is deposited between the Bowman's capsule and the Bowman's membrane and the epithelium. So this shows 1 to 10 bluish white elevations or nodules. Bluish white elevations or nodules in circular fashion are seen. It causes discomfort because of the loss of epithelium from the surface of nodules. Okay, because of loss of epithelium it causes discomfort, and it also causes visual loss. If the nodules are seen in the central portion, then this causes visual loss. Then the treatment is you can do keratoplasty. Okay, so I will show you the picture, just a minute. So this is the picture showing Salzmann nodular degeneration. You can see these two nodules. Okay, so this is about Salzmann nodular degeneration. Then we have pellucid marginal degeneration. In pellucid marginal degeneration, there is corneal thickening seen here, and as the name says, it is marginal, so it is present in the periphery, and this will induce astigmatism. Okay, I will even show you the picture of pellucid marginal degeneration also. So this is the picture showing pellucid marginal degeneration. If you just zoom in, you can see the degeneration that is occurring here, right? So that is pellucid marginal degeneration. Okay, then If you see second, we have here, this is called as furrow degeneration or senile marginal degeneration. So this furrow degeneration or senile marginal degeneration, here there is mainly thinning of the periphery of cornea. Because there is thinning of periphery of cornea, it shows like a furrow. Okay, in arcus senilis, this furrow will occupy the area of lucid interval of Vogt. This lucid interval of Vogt is the area between the arcus senilis and the limbus. Okay, so it will occupy the area of lucid interval of Vogt in arcus senilis. So this furrow degeneration is thinning occurs at the periphery of cornea. Okay, why is there this thinning? This thinning is due to the fibrillar degeneration of stroma results in thinning. It can cause astigmatism. Okay, so this is the furrow degeneration which you see here. Periphery of the cornea is thinned. Okay, then we have next type of degeneration which is called as spheroid degeneration, also called as climactic drop keratopathy, also called as Labrador keratopathy or corneal elastosis or Beats nodular dystrophy. So here if you see, it is most commonly seen in outdoors, in males who are used in outdoors, especially hostile climate. It is whenever there is exposure to UV rays or radiation or corneal disease, it can cause this climactic droplet keratopathy or spheroid degeneration. Here mainly there is amber colored spheroidal granules are seen, and these are accumulated. You can see here the granules, right? Amber colored spheroid granules are seen, and they are accumulated in the cornea, especially at the level of Bowman's membrane and anterior stroma. These are accumulated at the level of Bowman's membrane and anterior stroma. Even here vision is affected. You can do corneal transplantation for this climactic keratopathy. Next we have Terrien's marginal degeneration. What do you see in this Terrien's marginal degeneration? Here there is non-ulcerative thinning is seen in Terrien's marginal degeneration. It is most commonly seen in males more than 40 years of age. It is asymptomatic corneal opacity separated from limbus. Here asymptomatic corneal opacity separated from limbus by a clear zone is seen. Here there is asymptomatic corneal opacification, and this slowly progresses and it can cause superficial vascularization also. Okay, sometimes dense yellow white deposits can also be seen. So complications like perforation or pseudopterygium can occur. Okay, so this is the picture showing this Terrien's marginal ulcer. Okay, then we have pathological corneal degenerations, which include, first we have fatty degeneration or lipoid keratopathy. Here you see mainly whitish or yellowish deposits are seen on the cornea, which consists of cholesterol and fatty acid. These are initially intracellular, followed by sometimes extracellular or necrosis of stromal cells are seen. Okay, so in this lipid keratopathy we have two types. One, we have primary lipid keratopathy and we have secondary lipid keratopathy. In primary lipid keratopathy, you don't need to know the details of it. At least you should know that the primary is rare and it occurs without and the disease is primarily seen in the cornea, and in secondary it occurs due to some other diseases, like it can occur due to systemic infections or interstitial keratitis. Okay, and it can occur due to ocular trauma, glaucoma or chronic iridocyclitis. What is important is in secondary type of lipoid keratopathy you see vascular cornea, whereas primarily you see there is cornea is free of vascularization. Primarily you will not see any vascularization, but secondary you see vascularized cornea. Treatment is unsatisfactory. So if you see, this is the picture of the lipid deposition. You see whitish or yellowish deposits which are seen here. Okay, next you have one more type which is called as hyaline degeneration. So in hyaline degeneration, here the characteristic is there will be many hyaline sperules, not one but there will be many hyaline sperules, spherical shaped hyaline deposits are seen on the superficial stroma. Okay, even this is primary and secondary. Similar to that of lipoid keratopathy. If primary, it is bilateral. If it is secondary, see, if it's primary, it is not associated with other ocular diseases. If it is secondary, it is associated with other corneal diseases. Primary, it is bilateral, associated with granular dystrophy. Secondary, it is unilateral. Okay, secondary can occur in other corneal diseases like long-standing keratitis or long-standing glaucoma or trichomatous pannus. In such situations, you can see this hyaline degeneration. Then the next important thing is about amyloid degeneration. So what do you see in amyloid degeneration? In this, there is deposition of amyloid material underneath the epithelium. So below the epithelium, there is deposition of this amyloid material is seen beneath the epithelium. So it is divided into two types. We have primary amyloid degeneration and we have secondary amyloid degeneration. Obviously, primary amyloid degeneration is in healthy cornea. Secondary amyloid degeneration is in the diseased cornea. Then let us now learn about the anomalies of sizes of and shape of cornea. First, we have megalocornea. So what is megalocornea? In megalocornea, the horizontal diameter of the cornea, normally it is 10 millimeters, but in megalocornea we call something as megalocornea if the horizontal diameter of the cornea is more than 11.7 millimeters. If it's more than 11.7 millimeters, then we call it as megalocornea. In adult, that is at birth. In adults, the size of the cornea is 11.7 millimeters normally. So if it is more than 13 millimeters, then we call it as megalocornea. So here cornea is normal, the normal vision is seen, but the only problem here is the cornea is bigger. At birth, if it is more than 11.7 millimeters, then it is megalocornea. In adults, if it is more than 13 millimeters, then we call it as megalocornea. Now this megalocornea is mainly associated with syndromes like Marfan syndrome, Eppard syndrome, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and Down syndrome. Sometimes megalocornea is confused with other conditions like Buphthalmos and keratoglobus. Okay, next we have microcornea. So what is microcornea? In microcornea, here the diameter is less. The horizontal diameter at birth, if it is less than 10 millimeters, it is called as microcornea. This microcornea is associated with mainly nanophthalmos and microphthalmos. That is, cornea is less, it is associated sometimes with smaller eye. Okay, so that is microphthalmos. So this is microcornea. Then we have to learn some points about corneal opacity. So what is corneal opacity? Corneal opacity is presence of normal transparency of cornea is corneal opacity. So in the corneal opacities, loss of normal transparency of cornea is called as corneal opacities. So there are many causes of corneal opacities like developmental anomalies following birth trauma, healed corneal ulcers or corneal wounds. All these will lead to corneal opacities. Okay, so because of this corneal opacity, that is, there is an opacity present in the cornea. The main reason why we can see is due to the transparency of cornea and transparency of lens. But here, if the cornea becomes opacified, then there is no proper vision, so there is loss of vision, and sometimes it is associated with blurred vision. Okay, types are very important. Types include, first we have nebular corneal opacity. So in this nebular corneal opacity, we call it nebula. Here there is faint opacity. If in the superficial scars involving the Bowman's membrane and superficial stroma, then it causes faint opacity. See here, the nebular opacity is mainly involves the superficial scars which are involving Bowman's layer and superficial stroma only. Here nebular corneal opacity, we call something as nebular corneal opacity if it contains superficial scars involving Bowman's layer and superficial stroma. Then we call it as nebular corneal opacity. Then we have So all this is not important, but what is important is nebula will cause more discomfort due to irregular astigmatism than leukoma. It causes more corneal more ocular discomfort, because this nebula is mainly involving the papillary region. If it involves the papillary region, it interferes with vision and causes more irregular astigmatism. Okay, that is about nebula. After nebula, the next important thing is macula or macular corneal opacity. We call it macular corneal opacity if scarring involves the half of the cornea, about half of the cornea. If the scarring involves half of the cornea, then we call it as macula or macular corneal opacity. Then we call it as leukomatous or leukoma corneal opacity if the opacity is present in the, or if the scarring is present in more than half of the stroma, then we call it as leukomatous corneal opacity. Okay, right? Next we have something called as adherent leukoma. We call it adherent leukoma. It occurs if healing occurs after perforation of the cornea. If it occurs after perforation of the cornea with incarceration of iris, then we call it as adherent leukoma. Okay, then we have corneal facet. In corneal facet, the corneal surface is depressed at the site of healing. In corneal facet, the corneal surface is depressed at the site of healing. Okay, such a scar is called as facet. Here there is depression of corneal surface occurs. Okay, that means if this is, think that this is the corneal surface. Okay, here if this is the area where there is injury, here there is depression of the corneal surface occurs, and this is called as facet. Okay, that is corneal facet. Okay, then we have keratosis. What is keratosis? Keratosis is increase in curvature of cornea, is called as keratosis. Then there can be anterior staphyloma can also occur. Anterior staphyloma is ectasia of pseudocornea, is called as anterior staphyloma. So these are the different corneal opacities which can occur. Among them, most important are leukoma, macula, nebula are most important. Now, what are the secondary changes that occur in corneal opacity? Secondary changes like hyaline degeneration, calcareous degeneration, pigmentation and erythematous ulceration can occur in corneal opacity. Secondary changes like hyaline degeneration, calcarine degeneration, pigmentation, erythematous ulceration can also occur. Then how are you going to treat it? The treatment of this corneal opacity, sir, you can do optical iridectomy can be done. Especially for macula or leukomatous opacities, we can do optical iridectomy. Okay, then we can also do phototherapeutic keratectomy or keratoplasty can also be done. We can do keratoplasty if iridectomy cannot be done. See, if we cannot do iridectomy, then we go to keratoplasty. If iridectomy can be done, then mostly we do optical iridectomy. Okay, there is something called as tattooing of scar. Here what we do is, the epithelium which is covering the opacity is first removed under topical anesthesia. First you will remove the epithelium which is covering the opacity under the local anesthesia, and you put a small piece of the blotting paper of same size and shape soaked in 4% AuCl or PtCl, and then it is applied for 2 to 3 minutes, and this filter paper is removed. So that scar which is there, that scar you can find out easily. Then after removing the filter paper, then you will use freshly prepared 2% hydrazine hydrate solution is poured on it, and then eye is irrigated with normal saline and patched after instilling antibiotic and atropine eye ointment. So this is the procedure which is called as tattooing of scar. Anyways, we are not doing it now. Now the main important procedure that we do is optical iridectomy. If it is not possible, then we go to keratoplasty. Even phototherapeutic keratectomy is also done sometimes. Then now we have done about the opacities. Now let us learn a few points about corneal ulcer. Okay. So first we will see the pathophysiology of this is about perforated corneal ulcer. We will see this also. Okay. So it's simple. Whenever the bacteria invades the cornea, then there will be breach in the epithelium of the cornea that results in ulcer formation, right? So whenever this ulcer is formed, so that ulcer will deepen and reaches the Descemet's membrane, and once it reaches the Descemet's membrane will bulge out like this and leads to the formation of descemetocele. Okay, so this descemetocele, whenever the person coughs or sneezes, then this will perforate the corneal ulcer. Once the corneal ulcer is perforated, beneath the cornea we have aqueous chamber, right? Anterior chamber. So in that we have aqueous fluid. So this aqueous fluid will come out, and this will decrease the intraocular pressure. Then lens and iris lens diaphragm moves forward. I'll show you the descemetocele. Just so if you see, this is the descemetocele that we can see. This one which you can see here, this small bubble like structure, this is nothing but descemetocele. So whenever there is corneal ulcer, when it reaches up to the Descemet's membrane, normally the ulcer should be only in the epithelium, right? Reach in the epithelium. But if it deepens and if it reaches the Descemet's membrane, then this Descemet's membrane will bulges out like descemetocele. Then even a smaller things like coughing, sneezing or straining for stools, smaller things, even they will perforate the corneal ulcer, and as a result the aqueous in the anterior chamber will come out, decreasing the intraocular pressure. Then iris lens diaphragm will move forward. Then what happens is, this perforation, if it is small, it heals by cicatrization. If this perforation which we are talking about, if it is small, simple, it heals easily. Okay. Then but if it is, what about the pathology of sloughing corneal ulcer and formation of anterior staphyloma? We will also see this. See, now the corneal ulcer is now filled with pus. Okay, it sloughs, that is, it is filled with pus, and because of this the iris will also get, because of the pus, iris will also become inflamed. Okay, and there is exudates will be present, and these exudates will block the pupil. Okay, once it blocks the pupil and they cover the iris surface, and this leads to the formation of false cornea, and these exudates which are there, they will form a thin fibrous layer, and this leading to the formation of something called as pseudocornea is seen in this slough. This slough will enter into the aqueous humor, and they will cover the pupil and they will form this pseudocornea. Okay, this pseudocornea is thin, and because it cannot withstand the intraocular pressure, this will bulges forwards and it forms something called as ectatic cicatrix, which is nothing but anterior staphyloma. So this pseudocornea, because it is thin and can't withstand intraocular pressure, it bulges forwards and it forms ectatic cicatrix, which is nothing but anterior staphyloma. And this anterior staphyloma is something, it looks like a bunch of grape appearance. It looks like bunch of grape appearance, and it is lobulated, blackened with iris tissue. It looks lobulated, blackened with iris tissue, and this is called as bunch of grape appearance. See, I'll tell you what I have read now. Okay, I'll just show you with a diagram so that it becomes easier. So if this is the eyeball, right, you have iris with ciliary body, right? Now this is the lens. These are the ciliary zonules. Okay, so now there is infection, right? Because of the infection, there is infection of the cornea. Okay, this infection of the cornea will lead to sloughing of cornea. So as a result, there is inflammation of this iris. Okay, once there is so infection spreads to the aqueous humor and the iris. So there is inflammation of this iris also. Okay, so as a result, the exudates will form in the aqueous chamber, aqueous humor, there will be exudates formed because of the infection. Okay, so these exudates will now form a layer in the pupil and they block the pupil. Okay, this layer which you formed here is called as pseudocornea, but this cornea is very, delicate, and as a result this will bulge out, and it will also bulge out like this, and it will sometimes even bulge out over the true cornea, thus causing something called as anterior staphyloma. This is anterior staphyloma which is formed. This anterior staphyloma will also have this iris tissue with it, and because it has this iris tissue with it, it looks like bunch of grape appearance. Okay, I'll show you the picture of this. Okay, so this is the example of anterior staphyloma, okay, where the cornea has been, bulged out. Okay, then what are the clinical features? In the clinical features, there will be, number 1, there will be purulent corneal ulcer, and here there can be hypopyon corneal ulcer also. Symptoms like foreign body sensation, watering from eyes or photophobia, blurred vision, redness of eyes, all these normal symptoms will be there. And here you see swelling of eyelids, blepharospasm can occur. You can see here, right, the chemos conjunctiva or conjunctival hyperemia. There will be circumciliary congestion also. So how is corneal ulcer seen? You can see here corneal ulcer. You will see grayish white circumscribed infiltrate is seen with an epithelial defect, and infiltrate enlarges, and this will even lead to stromal edema. Okay, the ulcer is, see, the ulcer is starts as a epithelial defect and it progresses to grayish white circumscribed infiltrate. Okay, stromal edema can occur, or it can also form an yellowish white area of ulcer with oval or irregular in shape. And if you see, margins of the ulcers are swollen and the floor of the ulcer shows necrotic material, and you will see stromal edema. See, the margins of the ulcer here are swollen, and the floor, obviously it contains necrotic edema, necrotic material. So this is a corneal ulcer, most preferably bacterial corneal ulcer. Then what are the complications of corneal ulcer? The complications of corneal ulcer are, the infection can spread to the iris, leading to toxic iridocyclitis. Because of the formation of the pseudocornea, which I have said, this can lead to secondary glaucoma. There can be desmetocele. These desmetocele can lead to corneal perforation. When there is corneal perforation, this can cause prolapse of the iris, right, because of the drainage of intraocular fluid, that is aqueous humor. This can cause prolapse of the iris. It can also cause anterior subluxation of the lens. Okay, corneal perforation can also cause corneal fistula, anterior capsular cataract, or purulent uveitis or intraocular hemorrhage can occur. It can also lead to corneal scarring. So all these are complications of corneal ulcer. So if you do an ocular examination, on ocular examination you will see that there is gross lesions are seen on diffuse light examination. Then we can do regurgitation test, and syringing should be done to rule out the lacrimal sac infection. Then we can do biomicroscopic examination. Why do you do biomicroscopic examination? In this you will add a fluorescein stain or fluorescein dye into the eye. You will add 2% freshly prepared aqueous solution of 2 fluorescein dye into the eye, so that corneal defect will be stained, right. Next we can also use impregnated filter paper strip. This impregnated filter paper strip has dye over it, so when you put it over the eye, so the ulcer area will stain brilliant green. Okay, so this is the picture showing the staining of corneal infiltrates. See, these are the pictures which are showing the staining of corneal infiltrates. Okay, next you will have to do routine examination. Blood examination should be done, and you can do microbiological investigation also. Okay, in the microbiological investigation we can first scrape the base of the ulcer with a spatula called as Kimura spatula. We can use with the help of Kimura spatula or a bent tip 20 gauge hypodermic needle. With either of that, you can scrape the base of the ulcer, and you can send it for gram stain, KOH mount, chalcophore white stain, or culture media, culture on blood agar, and culture on Sabouraud dextrose medium. So you can send it to any of these. Then after that, you will have to see about the treatment of corneal ulcer. So in the treatment of corneal ulcer, it depends upon the type of corneal ulcer. If it is an uncomplicated corneal ulcer, then you can use topical antibiotics, where you use fortified cefazolin 5% or fortified tobramycin 1.3%, or you can use fortified vancomycin 5%. We can use fortified cefazolin, which is 5%, or fortified tobramycin 1.3%, and fortified vancomycin, that is 5%, can be used. They can be instilled every 5 minutes for 30 minutes, followed by every 15 minutes for 2 hours, followed by hourly for 48 hours, then 2 hourly during the day. Okay, then you can also use systemic antibiotics like cephalosporins and ciprofloxacin can also be given. Then if you see next treatment, that is non-specific treatment. In non-specific treatment, we can give cycloplegic drugs like 1% atropine and 2% hematropine are given. Okay, obviously we can give NSAIDs, and vitamin B and C complex can be given, but mainly we can give cycloplegic drugs can be given. Then we can also advise for physical and general measures like hot fermentation or usage of dark goggles or rest, food, diet, fresh air. So those can also be advised. We can also advise the treatment of, if you come to treatment of non-healing corneal ulcer. So in this, first you will have to remove the cause. First and foremost, if there is any non-healing corneal ulcer, why is there this corneal ulcer, that you should see, and you should try to remove the cause of this non-healing corneal ulcer. And we can do mechanical debridement of the ulcer, or you can do cauterization of the ulcer, or you can do bandage with soft contact lens application, and peritomy can also be done. So we can do first we will have to remove the cause of non-healing ulcer. Then we will have to mechanically debride the ulcer, and we should cauterize the ulcer with cautery, and we can apply a bandage or soft contact lens over it, and peritomy can be done. Then how are you going to treat the impending perforation? See, you know that the perforation is going on, but it is inevitable. In that case, how are you going to treat it? In this, you should not stain. You should ask the person to not to stain, because whenever the person stains, there is a chance that the desmosile perforates, leading to corneal perforation. Okay, so we will have to ask the person to not to stain and use a pressure bandage. Okay, and intraocular pressure is decreased with acetazolamide sodium or mannitol, glycerol, timolol is given to decrease the intraocular pressure. Then we can ask the person to use topical adhesive glues, okay, or conjunctival flap, corneal membrane transplantation, or penetrating keratectomy, or we can use bandage contact lens. So all these can be used. Even in the perforated corneal ulcer also, we have to do the same things what we do for impending corneal ulcer. This is about the treatment of corneal ulcers. So if you see the characteristics of corneal ulcer, so if it is staphylococcal aureus or staphylococcal pneumonia, so staphylococcal aureus or streptococcus pneumonia, in this you see yellowish white. Here, if it is staphylococcal aureus or streptococcus pneumonia, staphylococcal aureus is the most common cause of bacterial corneal ulcer. Here you see yellowish white densely opaque ulcer, whereas Pseudomonas you see irregular sharp ulcer with greenish mucopurulent exudate. We can see irregular sharp ulcer with mucopurulent exudate is seen in Pseudomonas. Okay, so this is important about the Pseudomonas, where you see irregular sharp ulcer with thick green mucopurulent exudate. Then after this, Then we have the next type of ulcer, which is called as marginal catarrhal ulcer. So what is this marginal catarrhal ulcer? It mainly occurs due to hypersensitivity reaction to staphylococcal toxins or Moraxella or Haemophilus can cause this marginal catarrhal ulcer. Here, like any other corneal ulcer, there will be ocular irritation, pain, watering, photophobia is seen. Ulcer is shallow and infiltrated. Sometimes if there are multiple ulcers, marginal ulcers, then that can lead to vascularization. Okay, obviously we should do topical corticosteroids are recommended, and we can also use adequate antibiotic therapy. Okay, next, it is associated with chronic conjunctivitis and blepharitis also. This is associated with chronic conjunctivitis and blepharitis. Then if you see mycotic corneal ulcer, let us now learn some points about mycotic corneal ulcer. So in mycotic corneal ulcer, first we have fungi. In this, it is mainly caused by fungi. Like in this mycotic corneal ulcer, it occurs mainly due to fungi, which can occur due to filamentous fungi or yeasts or dimorphic fungi. It occurs due to filamentous fungi. Most common cause of mycotic corneal ulcer is Aspergillus. Most common cause of mycotic corneal ulcer is Aspergillus. Other filamentous fungi like Fusarium, Alternaria, Cephalosporium, Curvularia, Penicillium, Mucor and Rhizopus are also associated with this mycotic corneal ulcer. Some yeasts like Candida, Cryptococcus, dimorphic fungi like Histoplasma, coccidioids, plastomycosis. So all these will cause mycotic corneal ulcer. If you see clinical features, they have clinical features which is similar to that of bacterial ulcer. Okay, then if you see the mode of infection, they are caused by the injury by vegetative matter by field workers, or injury by animal tear. Injury by either animal tail or vegetative worker can lead to this fungal corneal ulcer. There is also role of antibiotics and steroids is also implicated. Sometimes secondary corneal ulcer can occur in immunocompromised individuals. Then if you see, how does this corneal ulcer look? This looks, so if you see here corneal ulcer, this is the corneal ulcer, which is dry looking, grayish white with elevated rolled out margin. Okay, then here you can see delicate feather like extensions, right? So these are the delicate, you can see these feather like extensions. So here you can see delicate feather like extensions are present in the surrounding stroma. Okay, so you see this is the dendrites which you can see, and this is also associated with a sterile immune ring also. This fungal corneal ulcer is also associated with sterile immune ring, that is yellow line of demarcation which you can see here. This is the site where fungal antigen and host antibodies meet. There are multiple small satellite lesions around the ulcer. So if you see, I will show you these satellite lesions also. So if you see here, if you actually correctly see, this is the ring and it is something like this we have, and surrounding it these small holes we have, right? You know, small white colored. So those are satellite lesions which you can see. Okay, so here we can see small satellite lesion can be seen around the ulcer. Then you can see sometimes hypopyon. Okay, epithelial plaque which you are seeing there, that is mainly composed of fibrin and leukocytes. Okay, so sometimes you can see pigmented ulcer can be seen, that is brownish pigmented ulcer is seen in dermataceous fungi. If it's dermataceous fungi can cause pigmented corneal ulcer. Okay, so this is the same thing which you can see here. Okay, Now, diagnosis, you should do clinical manifestations, and when you think that it can be a fungal ulcer, then you should do wet KOH or Calcophour white should be done, and you can do culture on Saborodextrose agar, which gives you positive result for fungal staining. But in order to rule out, gram staining can also be done. And now we also have how can you collect the scrapings. The scrapings, corneal scrapings, are taken from the base and edge of the ulcers. You can also do anterior chamber paracentesis, or corneal biopsy can be done if there is deep abscess. Then if you see the treatment, specific treatment, see this corneal ulcer. In this corneal ulcer you should not use any steroids. So corneal ulcer is a type of ulcer where you will not use any steroids. So no steroids are used in corneal ulcer. We can use topical eye drops like natamycin, topical antifungal eye drops like natamycin, amphotericin, fluconazole, miconazole or voriconazole can be used as treatment. But we should not give any steroids. Sometimes you can even consider intracameral or intraocular inoculation of voriconazole, especially if there is intraocular extension. If it is not just on the cornea, but if this has undergone to intraocular extension, then you can give intracameral or intracorneal or intrastromal administration of voriconazole can be done. Okay, so this is one important about the treatment. So once we have learnt about the fungal corneal ulcer, we have viral corneal ulcer. So in the viral corneal ulcer, this viral corneal ulcer can be caused mainly by 3 viruses. One, it can occur due to herpes simplex keratitis. Second, it can occur due to herpes zoster ophthalmicus. Third, due to adenovirus keratitis. First, let us now learn about herpes simplex keratitis. In herpes simplex keratitis, this herpes simplex virus is mainly a DNA virus. Okay, it is an epitheliotropic or neurotropic DNA virus. Okay, so this herpes simplex virus can be of 2 types. One, we have type 1, and second we have type 2. In type 1, this here the lesion is above the waist, and type 2 we call it as below the waist. This type 2 is the lesion which is transmitted to the eyes of neonates through genitalia or genital secretions of the mother. So this herpes simplex type 2, through genital secretions of the mother, it gets transmitted to the neonates. Then first we will see the primary ocular herpes. Just a minute, I'll just explain this, it becomes easier. Okay, so what are you seeing? For ocular herpes simplex infection, we have 2 types. One, we have primary herpes. Second, we have recurrent herpes. Primary herpes can involve skin, conjunctiva or cornea. In conjunctiva, it forms acute follicular conjunctivitis. But right now in this chapter, we are concerned with cornea. In the cornea, it can cause fine epithelial punctate keratitis, coarse punctate keratitis, and it can cause dendritic ulcers. Then in recurrent herpes, it can cause active epithelial keratitis, stromal keratitis, trophic keratitis and herpetic iridocyclitis. So we will learn each of them in detail now. So first we have primary ocular herpes. In primary ocular herpes, it mainly occurs in non-immune person, and it is common between the age group of 6 months to 5 years of age, and it is common in teenagers. So it has similar features like mild fever, malaise, lymphadenopathy can be there, multi-system failure, and rarely it can cause encephalitis. Okay, it has skin lesions which is involving vesicular lesions involving the skin of face, lips, lids, periorbital region. All these are seen. All those signs which are normal for herpes simplex keratitis. Normal infection of herpes simplex keratitis. Which of the signs that the herpes simplex normal infection can cause, all those signs will be there even in herpes simplex keratitis, like systemic signs and skin lesions. But what we are concerned here is about the ocular lesions. So I am just dealing with the ocular lesions. Okay, so in the ocular lesions, obviously in the conjunctiva there will be acute follicular conjunctivitis, but in keratitis we see diffuse branching. See, there is diffuse coarse punctate or diffuse branching epithelial keratitis is seen. So these are diffuse branching epithelial keratitis is seen here in this picture. Then that is for primary ocular herpes. So there can also be recurrent herpes. Why does there a recurrence in herpes? Actually the virus lies dormant in trigeminal ganglion. So periodically it reactivates and causes recurrent herpes infection. The recurrent herpes infection can occur due to anything. It can occur due to fever or exposure to UV light, general ill health, or emotional or physiological exhaustions, or it can occur due to mild trauma, menstrual stress, or systemic steroids. Anything can result in this corneal recurrent herpes simplex. Now what is important is epithelial keratitis. In the recurrent herpes simplex, the first type is epithelial keratitis. Here first you see these are the features. These features are important. It causes punctate epithelial keratitis. Second, this is dendritic ulcer, which you can see here. This is dendritic ulcer, which shows irregular zigzagged linear branches with knobbed at the ends. So you can see knobs at the end and it is zigzag ulcer. So that is dendritic ulcer. Okay. Here the floor of the ulcer is stained with fluorescein, whereas virus laden cells are stained with rose bengal stain. See, this is geographical ulcer. See, many dendritic ulcers will enlarge and it coalesce to form this geographical ulcer or amoeboid configuration ulcer. So these are the three lesions which you see in epithelial keratitis. Then specific treatment, if you see for epithelial keratitis, we should give antiviral drugs. You can give acyclovir or ganciclovir, or you can also give trifluthymidine can be given, adenon arabinoside can be given, and you can also do mechanical debridement can also be done, okay, using cotton buds, sterile cotton buds. Then you can give systemic antiviral drugs also. Then the second type is we have stromal keratitis. In this stromal keratitis we have different types. In this stromal keratitis, one of it is disciform keratitis. This disciform keratitis occurs due to delayed hypersensitivity reaction. Due to delayed hypersensitivity reaction, this disciform keratitis occurs. So if you see here, you can see a round disc shaped lesion which is seen. That is disciform keratitis. So here you can see a focal disc. You can see focal disc shaped patch of stromal edema is seen. Okay. Around this sometimes you can see keratic precipitates also. You can see this ring of stromal infiltrate is seen in this also. So this is the ring of stromal infiltrates which you see around, and that is called as Basilis immune ring is seen. Okay, in disciform keratitis. Okay, next, even here you should give diluted steroid drops with acyclovir cover can be given. Okay, mainly we give antiviral drugs, but in disciform keratitis you can even give steroid cover. Then the next type of keratitis, the third type of keratitis is stromal necrotic keratitis. In stromal necrotic keratitis, here the patient has active viral infection and there is tissue destruction. Here you can see this stromal necrotic keratitis can be seen here. Here you see necrotic, blotchy, cheesy infiltrates, right, under the epithelial ulcer. Below the epithelial ulcer you will be not necrotic, blotchy, cheesy infiltrates are seen. So this is stromal necrotic ulcer. As the name says, it has necrosis. Then even here you should give antiviral drugs. Then we have something called as metaherpetic ulcers. Okay, in this metaherpetic ulcers, the main important thing is it is not an active viral defect. It is not an active viral disease. Here the defect is mainly present in the basement membrane of corneal epithelium. The defect is in the basement membrane of corneal epithelium. Here the margin, here you see indolent linear or ovoid epithelial defect is seen, and the margin of the ulcer is grey and thickened. Okay, so this is the picture of metaherpetic keratitis. Then after this metaherpetic keratitis, even here you should give lubricants, because see, this metaherpetic keratitis is not due to virus. So as a result, you can give lubricants, you can give artificial tears, you can give bandage, you can put a bandage, soft contact lens can be put, you can also do lid closure with tarsorrhaphy can be done. Okay, then the next ulcer which is important here is herpes zoster ophthalmicus. So in the herpes zoster ophthalmicus, this mainly the main cause of this ulcer is herpes zoster ophthalmicus mainly occurs due to varicella zoster virus. Okay, which commonly causes chickenpox in childhood. This remains dormant in the trigeminal neuron. Later, whenever there is decreased immunity or due to stress factors, this virus replicates and reactivates and travels down the ophthalmic branch of fifth cranial nerve, resulting in the present manifestations. Here the most important thing is frontal nerve is affected more commonly than lacrimal and nasociliary nerve. Okay, the lesions are limited to one side of the face, and here the ocular complication, we have something called as Hutchinson rule, where the vesicles are seen in the side and tip of the brain, side and tip of the nose. Side and tip of the nose shows vesicles with frequent ocular involvement. Then the clinical course can be divided into three types, where we have acute phase reaction. Acute phase lesions resolve in few weeks. Then we have chronic phase lesions which will persist for years. Then we have relapsing phase lesions, which are both acute or chronic lesions will reappear, resulting in relapsing phase lesions. If you see in acute phase lesions, first we will see acute phase lesions. Here general features will be there, even cutaneous, the normal chickenpox like pustules, then leading to first vesicle, formation of vesicle, then pustules, then they might rupture resulting in ulcer, and then following scar. So that normal feature will be present. What is related to ophthalmology is in herpes zoster or chickenpox or varicella zoster keratitis, you mainly see mucopurulent conjunctivitis or acute follicular conjunctivitis. It is associated with either mucopurulent conjunctivitis or acute follicular conjunctivitis. This is only important thing. Then this zoster keratitis have three parts. One, we have epithelial keratitis. So this is the picture of epithelial keratitis which you can see. Even here only you can see the microdendrites, where the dendrites do not have any knob like structure. So here you do not see any knob like structure which you generally see in herpes simplex virus. Right? Next we have nummular keratitis. Here in nummular keratitis you will see multiple tiny deposits which are surrounded by halo of stromal haze. You see multiple tiny granular deposits surrounded by halo of stromal gaze is seen. This on healing it forms nummular scars. I'll show you this nummular ulcers. So if you just zoom in to this into this picture, see in this picture you can see multiple spots. See, this is one spot, this is one, right? There are multiple corneal ulcers. Okay, these will heal into scalp formation. So this is nummular keratitis. So surrounding these there is hollow, right? So this is nummular keratitis. Numerous tiny granular deposits surrounded by halo stromal haze is seen, which is nummular keratitis. Okay, now this is nummular keratitis. Then the next zoster keratitis manifestation is 50% of zoster keratitis manifests as disciform keratitis, which I have already shown in the just before. Okay, next it can also cause episcleritis or scleritis. Okay, that is inflammation of sclera can occur. It can also cause inflammation of iris and ciliary body, that is it can cause iridocyclitis. Okay, it can lead to secondary glaucoma. Can lead to anterior segment necrosis and thysis bulbi. Most important is it is associated with neurological complications, especially if its motor nerve palsies are seen due to third, fourth and sixth and seventh nerves. Whenever there is motor palsies of third, fourth and sixth and seventh nerves can occur, or it can lead to optic neuritis in 1% of patients, or it can lead to encephalitis is seen in some patients. Okay, so these are the lesions which you see here. Then if there is any chronic phase, think that if there is any chronic phase lesions, in chronic phase lesions we can do post herpetic neuralgia. It can cause post herpetic neuralgia. Then it can also cause conjunctival lesions, which include mucous conjunctivitis, or corneal lesions like exposure keratitis. Okay, all these are not much important, but yeah. Next, how are you going to treat it? Treatment is important. Obviously you should give oral acyclovir or antiviral drugs like acyclovir and gelcyclovir can be given. You can give analgesics for pain. You can give systemic steroids can be given to inhibit the post herpetic neuralgia. To inhibit post herpetic neuralgia you can give systemic steroids. Then histamine blockade, for that you can give this cimetidine. Then you can do local therapy for skin lesions. Okay, like antibiotic therapy you can give, or you can give local therapy for ocular lesions can be given. Okay, so all these can be given. Next, see, all these is not necessary. Remember that for herpes zoster we use acyclovir, that's it. Next we have protozoal keratitis or acanthamoeba keratitis. Okay, in this acanthamoeba keratitis, even this I will show you few things which you have to remember, only those are important. In acanthamoeba keratitis, the main etiological feature is acanthamoeba castellani. Here it most commonly occurs due to direct contact or contact lens wearers using homemade saline. In contact lens wearers using homemade saline, or direct contact or non-contact lens situation like mild trauma. In these cases you can see this acanthamoeba infection. Sometimes it is associated with patients with herpetic keratitis, bacterial keratitis, bullous keratopathy and neuroparalytic keratitis. Okay, it can cause symptoms like asymptomatic foreign body sensation, mild to moderate pain, watering, photophobia, blurred vision, blepharospasm, all these can be seen. Then what is important here is, here you will see, among all these I'll just put the important points. Okay, you will see epithelial lesions like epithelial roughening and irregularities, and epithelial ridges are seen. Okay, here you will see the roughening, right? It is not normal. Okay, and then sometimes you will see pseudodendrite formation is seen here. Then you will see ring abscess with stromal necrosis, and sometimes you will see hypopyon also. You will see satellite stromal infiltrates also, patchy satellite stromal infiltrates or ring infiltrates are seen. See, this is the ring which you can see. So this is the ring infiltrates. Sometimes you can see stromal infiltrates. So you can also see ring abscess also. So if there is limbal lesions, it can cause limbitis, or sclerosis can also cause, or it can also cause posterior scleritis. Now how are you going to diagnose it? Obviously you should do confocal microscopy. In this you can directly visualize the cyst of acanthamoeba. If you do KOH you can see the cyst. You can do chalcophore white stain can be used where the cyst is stained green. Okay, so here the chalcophore white stain. So this is the calcophore white stain where the cyst is staining green in color. You can see green color cysts, right? So lactophenol blue cyst, here you can see the cyst staining blue color. Okay. In non-nutrient agar also you can grow the acanthamoeba. Okay. Then how are you going to treat it? If you see the treatment, the main specific treatment is important, where you give diamides, that is propamide isethionate, hexamidine, or biguanides like polyhexamethylene biguanide or chlorhexidine, or sometimes you can give aminoglycosides or imidazoles can be given. At least you should know the names of the drugs. Okay, especially biguanides are specific and diamidines are specific. Okay, so this is about the acanthamoeba keratitis. So in this chapter we have learned about some lesions of cornea. Thank you guys for watching my lecture. In the next class we will learn about some more ulcers of cornea and end the class. Thank you.